During the chase by the hypocrites, Messenger Muhammad met and was received by many people who heard him and who believed in him. Minister Benjamin X of Muhammad's Temple No. 24 in Richmond, Virginia, rented a room to the Messenger of Allah for nearly 7 years in Washington, D.C. During that time, Minister Benjamin recalls that the Messenger was a very special man even then. When he first met Messenger Muhammad in 1935, and though he had only lived in his home for nearly 3 days, the minister recalls that he had not seen the Messenger eat nor go out for a meal. So he invited Messenger Muhammad to eat with him and his family on the next evening, and the Messenger accepted. The next morning, the Messenger went out, and even though he was the guest for dinner, he bought all the food that would be needed for the meal. That afternoon, he borrowed an apron and assisted Minister Benjamin's wife, Clara, as she prepared the meal. He then asked the minister to invite some friends, a practice that became a frequent one at the minister's home, and one which the Messenger still carries on today. That evening, the guests, the minister, and his family first learned of the great teachings which the man they knew in their home as Mr. Bogans possessed. It was there in Washington, D.C., at 1306 Girard Street, on May 8, 1942, the Friday before Easter, in the home of Mrs. Williams, where Messenger Muhammad was arrested by 2 FBI men. This incident began a new chapter in the courageous struggle of the Muslims, as most of all the male followers were jailed in federal prisons with the Messenger, including 2 of his own sons.
Most of the activity for the next 5 years was carried on by the Muslim women, at that time led by the Messenger's wife, Sister Clara Muhammad. Minister Benjamin recalled,
Later on, the time, Sister Muhammad, his wife, Clara Muhammad, she got with the few bottles that she had, which wasn't in it, which covered at the time. And she brought down, I think the bill was down about $5,000. She was just as white, I guess it was good. And she brought a little bag with some money that she said that the believers sold paper, rags, iron, wool carpet stuff, and they got the bill out. And, brought that money down there, and they started the white people there in Washington, and they took it back to the room, and they counted all the little pennies out. That his few believers there in Chicago had got together to get him out on bail.
Sister Lois,
Yes.
tell us how life was for the Muslim women while their husbands were in prison.
Well, with the children, I worked and I cared for them very well. When my husband returned, they were well taken care of, and I had plenty of food and everything that the household needed.
What were some of the things that took place while your husband was away in the temple?
Well, only the children, I kept my children in school, and I was harassed about the outside school, public school, bringing them in, but with no problems at all. I kept them in the Muslim school and took care of them very well by working.
The Honorable Elijah Muhammad was in Chicago when his son Wallace was born. Master W.D. Farad named him and wrote to Sister Muhammad to take special care of him. To our leader, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Master Farad Muhammad said, "Now you have one born to help you in your mission." During 1945 and 1946, the Detroit Temple was located at Temple and Riopelle Street. The site is now a slaughterhouse.
During that particular time, when the messenger was teaching us, he was away from us most of the time because we had an infiltration of hypocrites, the hypocritical type of person who wanted to take his life, who wanted to persecute him. And those were very, very perilous times. But of course, we with the faith banded together. And by banding together and keeping the faith and praying to Allah, we were able to overcome these. But of course, they cropped up in different forms. They came in, they partook of the teachings, and they wanted to proclaim that they were members, but actually they were not. We had various forms of deception. And as a consequence, as a direct consequence of this, we, the poor Muslims, at that particular time, realized the peril that was around us. And we had to be very, very cautious, very careful, and very diplomatic the way that we handled the situation and handled the people that were around us.
For 7 years, the enemies and hypocrites chased the messenger as he fled from city to city to avoid the wrath of such a wicked people, but yet always continuing his mission, going from Milwaukee to Washington, Cincinnati, Baltimore, New York, Boston, Springfield, Newark, Providence, Richmond, and Atlanta. He was always teaching salvation for the American so-called Negro.
Brother Jordan,
Yes.
would you tell us about the times during the early 30s when Messenger Muhammad was running for his life, during the time when they had the enemy and the hypocrites were?
Well, things were going along pretty fair, but pretty rough, and then they got after him, and they tried to close out because the children were going to school, and they didn't want to send the children to school. And so they suffered around, and so all of a sudden, he had to leave out. And so at the time when he was leaving, he sent for me to come over to take his works on, carried on until he returned. And so at the time that he was going away, they would come and ask me, did I know where he was? And I'd tell them no. And I says, I'm looking for him myself. And so that's the way it went. And so otherwise, time was hard. So we just scuffling from door to door, trying to keep the temple open and moving on until the things got kind of quiet.
America declared war against Japan, Germany, and Italy on December 1941. Again, the black man of America was suffering and being put to death as he took up arms with the slave master and his children. Elijah Muhammad and his followers were Muslims who submit to the will of Allah. They lived, taught, and practiced the religion of Islam, which means peace.
In the early 30s, what I mean, the messenger was in Detroit. And so when the messenger was in Detroit, and then he came to Chicago, what I mean, to set up a temple here in Chicago. And he did set up a temple here in Chicago. And then after he got the temple set up in Chicago, he went back to Detroit. He was in Detroit, what I mean, and then he had some disturbance, what I mean, with our enemy. And this was in 33. And then the Captain Machar, he got about 4 or 5 carloads of us and rushed to Detroit. They got a telegram, what I mean, from Detroit that they was bothering the messenger. And they got 5 or 6 cars, what I mean, loaded us in. They called us from our home. They get to the temple at 33rd and State, the old Oddfellows Hall, while we had a temple at, quickly. So we got there quick as we could. And they got us together, and we left there that evening. It must have been around about 4:30 or 5 o'clock for Detroit. So we made it into Detroit. I don't know just what time, but we made it into Detroit and went to the messenger's house while the messenger was. He was gone. And we left there and we went to the jail. And we didn't go to the front door to go in the jail. We went all the way, walked all the way from the bottom step all the way to the top. Stopped on every floor looking for the messenger. And so they told us what it meant. When we found out, he said he isn't here. And so we left. And we drove around to Detroit, what it meant, for a long time. Then we left back to Chicago. We come back to Chicago, and so I think when they had the fight down at 11th Street, this is when when our enemy, what I mean, really come to be, what I mean, against the messenger more than what he was. And the messenger, he moved to Chicago.
In 1942, on direct orders of the president, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was arrested for draft evasion, even though he was 45 years old, far beyond the qualified years for drafting. Approximately 132 followers were sent to federal prison for not taking up arms. What a brutal and ironic turn for the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Successfully enduring a chase of 7 years by enemies who were seeking to kill him, and now to begin serving a prison sentence in the hands of his open enemy. He taught salvation, proper foods to buy, and proper preparation and clean living. The messenger was arrested May 8, 1942 in Washington, D.C., was bonded on $5,000 bail money, which was brought to Washington by his wife, Sister Clara Muhammad. The messenger returned to Chicago. On the 18th of September, as the messenger was teaching the theology of time, he told the Muslims to expect some unfortunate events to happen affecting them, but to hold fast to Islam. On September 20th, 1942, the FBI agents arrived at the temple before the meeting and arrested approximately 100 men of the Fruit of Islam. The messenger was arrested at his home at 6026 South Vernon Avenue. Here was a peaceful man, sentenced and convicted along with his followers all over the country for not taking up arms. Serving in Milan, Michigan at the Federal Correction Prison along with his son Emmanuel and other of his followers, among them who were Brother Lester.
Brother Lambert, tell us, when did you first accept Islam?
1933.
Brother Lambert, tell us about the arrest incident of the Muslims in 1942 at the temple.
September 20, 1942, 104 East 51st Street. One Sunday morning, we went to a meeting, and the FBI had things broke in the door, and everyone came in to arrest them and put them in jail. And we got sent about jury bond. We was sent to Milan, Michigan, and then January 25th, 1945, we were released.
What were you arrested for?
Arrested for selective service.
For not going to the army?
Not going to the army.
Life in the prison with the messenger, the first 4 months in prison was rather hard on us because the prison authority didn't understand us. But after we were there for 4 months, then they began to understand us and began to relinquish some of their restrictions on us. We were able to move around in the prison freely without any hindrance. Now, the food in the prison wasn't good because we being Muslim, we could not eat any kind of food. Most of the food that was cooked there in prison was cooked with pork, and this is forbidden to be eaten by a Muslim. So our life there in prison was good after we were there for about 6 months. Then the things began to get better for us there.
Well, I was in Milan, Michigan, the federal institution. I come to be one of the first trustees, and I taking care of the warden's little grandson. The Holy Apostle had a special assignment from us, and that was in the officer quarters. So when I get off early, I would go by and help him get through early so he can come in and teach the brothers in the evening. And he taught me how to pray. While I was in there, I thought I knew when I first went. But after I got with him, helping him get through, he blessed me with teaching me a special prayer for him. I have a special prayer that he taught me special for him alone. And therefore, our first time being there, when coming out, Officer Whitehead, before we getting ready to leave, he said to me, coming with the Holy Apostle, he said, 9740, you glad you're going home now, aren't you? I told him, no, sir, Mr. Whitehead, I'd rather for the Holy Apostle go and I stay here.